1992. He had gotten caught up in another scandal. And Tony ended up getting the race. That's how Tony became to the Senate.
It's a lot of things change when Vinnie Morrow left.
Vinny was he was a good political leader.
Yeah.
He was a smart guy.
That was
There's a
bad.
void.
Hmm?
That's the way. There's a void.
Oh, huge.
Huge void.
Arthur came back.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Arthur did a good job. Arthur was the chair, was a really
Alec, can you hear me? Okay, I can't hear you.
We were muted. So now you can hear.
Oh, okay, I can hear you now. Okay.
There you go.
You are good to go. And now.
Okay, the city notice, New Haven 2023 Charter Revision Commission will convene on the following dates and times in Board of Alder's chambers located on the second floor of City Hall, on 65 Church Street, New Haven. The work of the commission is followed. April 11th, workshop in the chamber, Board of Alder, item 3, updating the Board of Alder's compensation, $5,000, Alder 6250 for president, including an increase to be tied to cost of living. Item 5, maintain the same number of Board of Alders and commissioners when alders are the same party Board of Alders. Item 6, updating the charter to include provisions regarding the memorandum of understanding to be approved by the Board of Alders. Item 9, review extending the time period for approval of nominees of the Board of Commissions from 60 days to 90 days. Public requests, virtual vote, ranked choice voting, traffic authority for healthcare board membership. April 12th, obviously 6 p.m. Workshop on charter. April 18th, 6 p.m. workshop on charter. April 22nd, 10 a.m. workshop on charter, additional public if needed. The 25th, deliberations and recommendations by the charter. May 9th, final deliberations and public hearing of the recommendations of the charter. Per order, Michael Smart, Chair, Test, Michael Smart, City Town Clerk. For accessibility related accommodations, please call 946-7651 voice or 946-8582 TTY. Public comment, testimony, and request to testify should be submitted via email. Public testimony at newhavencT.gov before 2 p.m. on the day of the meeting. These meetings are viewed on Board of Alders YouTube page. Per ongoing COVID-19 protocols, wearing a mask is required at the meeting. I'll start to our left. We have, introduce yourself.
I am Serena Neal San Giorgio. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Richard Furlow, good evening, Mr. Chair.
Michael Smart, good evening. Vice Chair.
English Works, good evening.
Sal DeCola, good evening.
Senator Green. Good evening.
Patricia Malta, good evening.
And Steve Mennick.
Okay.
Nice to be here.
So good to see you in person, Steve.
It's good to be seen. I'm sorry.
You look like.
I'm sorry. I didn't see Serena in person.
Well, you guys
yet.
switched places, right?
We know switch places.
I'm trading with you, Steve. I've got stuff. I got this weather's killing me.
Yeah, I hear you. It's good to be here. Thank you.
Good. So, Steve, we'll turn it over to you.
All right.
And we'll go from there.
So-
Sorry, right before we turn it over, there is an error in regards to the date. It says the 12th, but then the email on the 2nd, we will not be here on the 12th.
That's correct.
Okay,
It was a date they had reserved.
It's just a date.
okay, so tomorrow there's,
Nope.
It's right.
thank you.
Because I couldn't be here tomorrow. Where am I tomorrow? Stanford, I think, or North, Stanford. So here we are. Board of Aldermen number 3. This is updating the Board of Alders compensation to $5,000 for Alder and $6,200 for President, including increases tied to the cost of living increases. So I put down a little list of some of the data that was on the list that I provided you as a background document, just to help you a little bit through this process as a reminder. And there's 2 points I wanted to make. One of the reasons that I recommend that you place compensation in a charter is statute 7-460 requires, and this is very unusual, I'm looking at the alder here, 2 alders, that alder salaries, legislative salaries, have to be subject to referendum. So that you don't have to do your salaries in the charter, but if you do it in the budget, that component of the budget is subject to a referendum to approve your compensation. I put these in, I recommend that you place them in charters with a cost of living increase, because the referendum is the approval of the charter. And so that the voters have voted for it, knowing there would be an automatic escalator. If you want to change the base, and sometimes I do have provisions in there say that the alders could modify the baseline. That baseline change would have to go to the voters for approval at the end of a budget year if you were to modify. So that's the reason I recommend that you move in that direction if that's what you want to do. The amount as you know, is all over the place. The most shocking one to me, I'm counsel to the Middletown Common Council, was that they get $9,000 a year. I did a charter revision and didn't know that they got paid for their job. And it's one of the higher salaries. It's up there with the stipend for Bridgeport. Hartford is the top. But remember, Hartford has 9 members and a different kind of structure. We've changed our structure a little bit. Waterbury has kicked their numbers up substantially, roughly in the area that you're looking at. But the number of communities that have no compensation is really astonishing. Stanford, 0 for their 40 members. Norwalk, which I represent, $600 a year, goes back to 1932. That might have been a lot of money during the Depression. Danbury, no compensation. Bristol's pretty high. I was surprised by that at $10,166. So that's a political judgment you have to make in terms of what you think is prudent. But the reason I recommend that you put it in the charter is for the reasons I stated a moment ago. There's the other standard as well, which ties into the argument about 2-year term versus 4-year term. The state constitution, and again, why the state constitution gets this granular is something I don't have the answer to. I was 13 years old when they debated in 1965, so I was not there. But under the state constitution, mayors, local elected officials are only entitled to 2 raises over a 4-year period of time. You're not allowed to get a raise during your term. You can only get a raise prior to the term, meaning that this year, if you want to have a raise for the Board of Alders or the mayor in this year's budget, the budget that's being approved for July 1, you have to put it in this budget before the next term starts.
Good.
Oh, I thought there was a question.
No.
No, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and then if there's a 4-year term, you would do it before the commencement of the 3rd year. So it would be during the fiscal year that leads into the 3rd year of the term. So that's another little rule that you have to be mindful of. So that's it in terms of the background. So, Mr. Chair, I'll leave it to you and the members I don't know if you want to have any discussion on it.
I think kind of just go through and then we can have a little discussion.
So the second item is, I combined the 2 actually, item number 5 and item number 9, because they all deal roughly in the same area with boards and commission approvals and appointments. And the first one is the issue of maintaining the same number of alders on boards and commissions when all alders are the same party. New Haven is a very unique problem. And you don't have a problem like this in a large system. You don't have a problem like this in a hybrid system. You know, Camden has, Danbury has, and it's, I can't think of any other district system that has the problem either, but most of the communities still have some minority party, whether it's the Working Families Party in Hartford, the Republican Party in Stanford. You have 2 parties represented in a body. In this case, you have 1 party, and we compensated for that 10 years ago, creating a position that Alder DeCola holds in the leadership. It used to be the minority party leader, and now it's the third member of the body. So what the alders are trying to do is they're trying to preserve their system of aldermanic representation on boards and commissions that could be skewed by minority party representation rules. The 2 alders that are appointed have to be appointed in a manner that does not violate the rule. So I've attached, and you can take a look at it, the statute that deals with minority party representation to show how it works. I underscored or I emboldened the language that says it's the appointing authority that is responsible for maintaining it. And so I drafted language that you guys can look at, and it's your language in the end. And if it needs to be cleaned up, be my guest. There's no pride of authorship in this regard. That basically puts on the mayor the obligation to be mindful as he or she is making appointments to be mindful that you have a legislative body with representatives, and the legislative body doesn't have the flexibility to choose from the entire population. They can only choose from the 30 members of its body. And so they're stuck. And so the mayor can compensate by appointing minority party members, Republicans, working families, or just unaffiliated. It's actually an opportunity to open the doors for unaffiliated people to be on boards and commissions, because they're kind of, in the normal political world, they're kind of cut out when the parties are trying to take care of their people. So I wrote the language, I see one typo in it, I wrote the language to really put the burden on the mayor. Then that also puts the burden on the Board of Alders to be mindful when these appointments are coming before them, because I do say that the failure of the mayor to comply with the requirement shall be the sole basis of disapproval of the appointment by the Board of Alders in their sole discretion. So if the mayor is making an appointment that would skew the body in any way, shape, or form, you should reject it. You don't really need that in the charter, but you should reject it if that's the case. Or what happens, because you guys are the appointing authority, you don't get to make your appointment. If your appointments were to create an imbalance on the commission, you can't do it. So that's why, going forward, try to put the burden on the mayor to do it in the right way. And I haven't done an analysis to see where we are with all the appointments right now, so.
So for the record, I want to note,
The late
Keys,
attorney
how are
Keys,
you,
yes.
Commissioner? I'll do the call. Thank you, I'm Commissioner.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Reddick, I understand what you're saying, but the one we're really focusing on, the Board of Alders has 7, the president or not sit on boards automatically. And because we're all Democrats, we can't have somebody sitting on 7 different committees. I forget what they are. And that's the question we're talking about now. Those 7 positions that somebody from the minority party has to sit on that board of commission. And there's 7 of them, if I'm not mistaken.
If somebody gave me the list, I'd be happy to look at them.
That's what we're more focusing on.
I thought it was the aldermanic representatives on these boards.
Boards and commissions.
Yeah.
There's only 7 of them.
All right, there's only 7 boards and commissions.
That the board has to have
Got
2 representatives.
Yeah, and I think I thought that was addressing that, because,
Okay, I
Yeah.
just want to make sure. That's-
yeah, okay, good.
Okay, we're on the
Because,
same page.
yeah, the point I'm making is that the mayor appoints the rest of the members.
Correct.
And I'm saying that the burden should be on the mayor. Look, it's a political judgment. The president and the mayor need to work together to make sure that the body recognizes the dilemma that the alders have with respect to the composition of the Board of Alders. And short of changing it to an at-large system or a modified at-large system the way Waterbury went, where you get assurance of a minority party represented, that's not going to change. We've had 30 alders. I'm looking at Judge Keys, since I was on the Board of Alders, and I think for about 10 years before that, the 1970s.
Yeah, it was 29 for a
Yeah,
while,
it
but
was 33 at one point, 32. The numbers vary in the late 60s and early 70s, but it's been 30 for 50 years. So I think that's not going to change. So that's why the language was crafted to put the burden on the mayor, but it's really a political tool. The mayor's you're going to have to look at these boards and commissions. You may not get full representation because you do have to comply with the minority party representation statute.
So note for the record, Alder Rodriguez has joined us. Good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for the question. The second part of that is the issue of the timing of appointments. Right now, the 60-day rule, and I think the alders are looking for 90 days for the time for approval, the time of appointment to approval. And it's largely based on the fact that the Board of Alders has pretty solid rules. If you go around the state like I do and represent a number of these municipalities, New Haven is, I don't want to say this in front of Al, Lucas, really well organized in terms of the kind of office we have that provides support for the alders, but also our rule structure. The rule structure to me is pretty sophisticated on a level probably with the General Assembly, and just having a structure that is pretty cogent flexible, but not something you ignore. I don't think you ignore your rules. You sometimes, of course, suspend the rules from time to time. This is a result of those rules. I mean, you could expedite things if you wanted to suspend the rules to get people in the 60 days, but why do that? 90 days is not an outrageous period of time. So that's, again, a political judgment. I'll let the alders talk about that, when you have your discussion. But I think that's a pretty simple change request. The next item is something I spent a great deal of time on with the alders a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, almost 4 years ago. This would be updating the charter to include provisions requiring all MOAs to be approved by the alders. As the alders here know, they passed an ordinance a few years ago because there's a lawsuit that's actually still sitting out there that needs to be brought to conclusion at some point. That was commenced on the basis of an MOU from 2006. Nobody really knew about 2006 MOU, except for a union president who decided to take advantage of the MOU from 2006. And the ordinance already mandates the disclosure of all those agreements. The other reason we want to get these before you, so one, you want to find out what's going on, useful. Two, you want to find out, is something been agreed to that should have gone through the Board of Alders? And what do I mean by that? Multi-year contracts can only be executed with the approval of the legislative body of the city. The mayor does not have an ability, no matter how powerful or important the mayor may be, does not have the ability to commit the community to a multi-year commitment, financial commitment. Even the Board of Education has to come to you in their collective bargaining process, not for not for the bargaining rules and their compensation, but for pensions and long-term obligations. You approve that. You don't approve the rest of the contracts there. You don't get to approve the superintendent, but everything else, every other contract that they have, if it goes beyond 1 year, has to come before. So this would cover them as well. And what this does is it simply constitutionalizes the ordinance. The ordinance is much longer than this requirement, but this simply establishes kind of a constitutional foundation for the ordinance that you adopted 2 years ago or 4 years ago. Any questions? I think that's it on the aldermanic questions. Then we have a few public matters that have come up, and I wanted to try to walk through them a little bit here. In New Haven, we have currently a plurality vote standard in our charter. There are people who have, I saw this in Hartford with their charter revision last year, and I've seen it in other communities as well. People who are advocating other forms of voting, ranked choice voting, for example, feel that if we have a plurality provision in our charter, that would prohibit or put the city in a difficult position to effectuate ranked choice voting. That is true and it's not true. It's true if the state gives you a choice, and then you have the bar, unless the statute is written notwithstanding a provision of your charter. Because believe me, the state can give you the ability to override your charter agreement with collective bargaining agreements. Collective bargaining agreements trump charter provisions. And so they could actually, if they're drafting the language and they want to have the election reform, they can certainly trump your charter. But if they don't, then you would have to change your charter provision if you wanted to have ranked choice voting, because you have a plurality requirement. Most of the cities, I guess it's kind of Mets and Mets, have a good number of them have plurality standards. And my thinking on it is, again, it's up to you, is if the state moves in that direction, they will probably mandate it for the state. They're not going to say New Haven can have it and somebody else isn't. We're kind of a legislative home rule state. I don't think they're going to give you choices on voting. It's voting and counting ballots is a big enough problem already in the state of Connecticut for whatever reasons. So I think if they were to move in a direction, I think they'd probably move in a direction everybody would be covered by the same legislation. That's just my instinct on it. I'll leave the judgment to the rest of you. And I have a few notes on how the other communities address that issue. This is the issue of the traffic authority. Under state law, your police commission serves as the traffic authority. When I was an alder, I spent a lot of time with the police commission getting stop signs on Jack Keyes Street in Westville, and the traffic and planning, traffic guru, Mr. Cavallari, calls them Alderman Stop because they spend so much time putting stop signs up in the 26th ward. By law, the police commission serves as traffic authority. A lot of people who want to be on police commissions don't like that. Others don't have a problem with that. And so the language that I've developed here is that basically says, if the state were to change the law, in spite of the fact that you have this police commission, your charter is silent on it being the traffic authority, by the way, so you almost don't need to say anything. But I have recommended to communities just to make it clear that if the law changes, you have the ability to adopt an ordinance creating a traffic authority separate from the police commission. So it's a pretty simple fix. And then I think the last item is, this was very surprising to me. We have very constricted standards for some of, at least two of our members of the Board of Health, Public Health. And I believe that we've had a request to expand the categories to environmental justice, violence prevention, probably other areas as well. I am a big advocate. In a lot of my charters, you will see qualification requirements, the idea of the qualification requirements. And even in the New Haven Charter we put in 10 years ago was to have a diversity of qualifications. And I think we have qualifications at some of our boards and commissions beyond this. This is an old one we have here. And what I was fascinated to find was there were very, very few, there were some commissions, a lot of them didn't have charter provisions. A number of communities don't have public health boards. They have other entities that deal with aspects of public health. But there were some communities that didn't have a public health board. There was one, I actually put a footnote in here. Hartford has a commission on addiction in public health, and they had a very interesting description of expertise and experience addressing issues associated with substance use, consumers' preventative services, members of treatment and counseling communities, members of the law enforcement community, and citizens of communities impacted by various issues associated with substance use. So, you know, so my position on it is you can do what they've asked you to do to diversify and broaden the membership, and it's really your call. So those are the issues, Mr. Chairman. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the commission? Item? Vice Chair?
So I just have a quick question regarding the last one that you talked about, Steve, in terms of, so your recommendation, you're suggesting that we add those two members to be doctors of medicine? Is that the difference?
That's your current standard.
That's a current, okay.
So we were asked by, we were asked as Farwell to testify before you to add other categories. The two that
Got it.
were environmental justice and violence prevention.
Got it.
I'd be happy to look throughout the country to see if there are other standards you should look at, but I don't have a position per se, but you certainly, it is permissible, and I think public health is much broader than you know,
Medicine.
the way we looked at it 20 years ago. And
Agree. Thank you. My clarity.
Okay.
Good evening. If it please the chair, why don't we do it in order and go to the very first and see if there's any discussion so that we're not jumping around and we can kind of do it systematically. So the first thing that was mentioned is the compensation of officials and employees. And so If it please the chair, so we can have some discussion on that. I won't say anything just yet because conflict of interest.
You're in effect.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Just for clarity, Mr. Chair, in terms of including an increase tied to cost of living increases, what does that mean?
We would have some standard, whether it's, something comes out of the labor department, we would pick a standard. I can make a recommendation. I think look at what we've done on the charters, but we use some pretty, well-honed, indicators on cost of living. So,
Okay.
your Bureau of Labor statistics and things like that. So if you ask me to go forward drafting, I will come up with the proper standard.
Gotcha. Perfect. Thank you.
And so this would mean, Counselor, that any increase to the salary of Board of Alders that's based on cost of living, tied to cost of living, would not have to be by referendum.
Correct.
It would just be
Right.
automatic.
Because the public is adopting the standard by referendum.
Right.
And so, now, I think it's a pretty sound theory. No one's ever challenged it. It's never been challenged. There's no case law on it. But I believe that by adopting the standard by referendum, you're complying with 7-460.
And then also means that if it's a 2-year term, then it would be the beginning of every term, whether it's 2-year or 4-year.
It would be adopted in the July budget, in the fiscal year of the election year, so that it could be effective for January 1, at the beginning of the term. You can't raise it during your term. You could then raise it a 4-year term in the July 1 of the, if you're all running on the same cycle, there's no election, but what would have been the municipal election cycle. So it would be the halfway mark of the term. So that in the 3rd year, the January 1 of the 3rd year, you get a raise.
And I think it's good for the commissioners to know that the mayor has submitted in his proposed budget the increase for the elected officials as a proposal, so that should it pass the referendum, it would go into effect. Because as the councilor mentioned, it has to be in the previous year budget in order for it to take effect the next year. And so some are questioning, why is this in the budget? Because it's proposed, it's a projection of what could be. You have to put it in the budget in advance. We just want to keep everybody in the same. So,
And Mr. Vice Chair, maybe you could just enlighten the commissioners also, how do we get to the point where that actually came up as an item? Just the compensation from the board, or the COLA?
yeah, all the COLA would know, because my recommendation would be 25,000, but I'm joking. I am joking. But we were talking with Director Lucas to see when it was established that the Board of Alders
I was still here.
got their salary.
Yeah.
And then when has it been increased? And it has never been increased.
Yeah.
So it has been I don't even know how much it is, because it goes to a credit union. I don't even see it. 2,000, is it
Yeah, 2,000.
2,000 for alders and the president?
2,400 for the president.
And yeah, just slightly over for the president. So it's been like that forever. I think that when this was established in
89, I think, or
89.
98, somewhere in that period.
it was probably a lot of money, because gas was
No.
probably about $99.
Oh, I voted against it.
It wasn't a lot.
I voted against it.
Well, if it wasn't a lot back then it certainly isn't a
It
lot
was,
now.
it was not a lot back then, but it was, it's more than $600 normal walk-ins.
And so I think was because we have our members here,
The elderly.
the elder alders.
Painful.
Yeah, was that considered a cost of living amount for that time?
I think it was, and Commissioner Keys can correct me if I'm wrong, I just think it was an attempt to show that there was some value to the service we were providing, and I think it was the most that anybody thought we could get at the time. I'm not sure there was a lot more thinking that went into it than that.
It was a breakthrough, envisioned that it would go up
Yeah.
over time. It was a breakthrough. And the rationale was that many of the aldermen, and I'm sure they still do, were spending more money on tickets to events, political events that are part of the community nature of the job, so that it became a burden in the pocketbook and time. And just to alleviate that partially, it was never, and it's not now, full compensation. For goodness gracious.
None of the legislative bodies get full, even Hartford 15 doesn't get full compensation for the time that you spend on the job. People don't understand how much time alders do spend day to day on the job. But that was the thinking back then. There was some reimbursement for expenses, concerns, and things like that. But yeah, it's astonished me. I did not realize there was not an increase over the years. And the reason we put it in charters is, I started doing the modeling for mayoral salaries and compensation in charters, because you have other situations where mayors don't want to take increases. It's nice to see that the mayor actually has placed this in the budget. In our day, the lame duck alders would usually get a budget amendment in December. Remember I told you? In December, and we would unanimous consent. We do it very, very quickly after the election, because they didn't want to have in their budget the increase for the alders, the increase for the mayor. And so we always, in an election cycle, we knew we'd get a lame duck increase for the mayor, usually that way. And this takes it out of the political realm, frankly.
So Mr. Lucas, 600 in 1932 is 12,197 in 2023.
Wow.
I didn't show.
He's using the Norwalk.
Cost of increase.
You're using Norwalk? Yeah.
What they paid then now would be $12,000.
Based on
They're debating the issue in Norwalk as we speak. Actually, it's one of the big issues that we're looking at in Norwalk right now.
questions, more questions on items?
I just want to make sure I'm understanding. So anything that's outside of cost of increase, that's an increase, has to go to a referendum, is that correct?
If you don't have this provision adopted by the voters in your charter, any increase you got in a budget. So for example, if the mayor's budget goes through, let's say the referendum fails, the provision is in the charter, is in your budget, you can have a referendum on that increase. That's what you're statutorily required to do. So you don't need to have it in your charter. You can do a referendum anytime you want to have an increase. That's cumbersome, and most people are not going to vote for increases for the political class. I mean, unless you can make a good argument. So you can do it without a charter provision. The idea of the charter provision is it really dismisses and takes it out of the political realm. You have, political realm this year, you have to fight for it, get it in the charter and get it adopted, but you don't have to address it again. And the cost of living increases are relatively modest. So it's not like you're breaking the bank going forward on the, if you establish the standard.
I'll say something. As in the 12 years I've been in Alder, a lot of residents and just people talking would always say, why would you do this for $2,000 and get phone calls 24/7? And when I was in Japan for 10, 12, 14 days, I was getting phone calls. I was still doing my job, even on vacation. So this compensation is really nothing, but it might open up the door for other people if there is a cost to our job. You do have to go to events. You do have to have your suits cleaned. You do spend hours and hours. As leadership with Richard, Burl, and myself, we attend a lot of meetings. A meeting at noon, meeting at 9. So this compensation is just to give the burden off of let other people that might want to run, because some people can't afford this. So it's to open up the door, in my opinion, to give other residents of New Haven a chance to run, because maybe 5,000 would make it easier for them to have this position because there is a cost associated with it. Not just running for office, but day-to-day events, showing up at your events when you have on this program. Just, you have to make time for all this, and you just can't come in jeans and look like you just got out of a bar. So, I mean, there's many factors in this. So I'm just saying I'm not saying I want it. It's just the point is for the future, we give more residents an opportunity that want to run, because this will offset some of the costs of them that they might not be able to absorb. That's just
In the Hartford charter process last year, they expanded, most board and commissions don't get compensation, and some of them are prohibited. You can't compensate Board of Education by law, you can't compensate boards of finance and things like that. I don't know why they have that standard, but they do. Because, particularly in the urban areas, there are a number of people who can't afford to leave their children. They have no place to leave their children, so they need daycare. They need some kind of assistance for that, or transportation costs, or things like that. So Hartford's charter does have a provision that allows for compensation for those types of needs. So you can have a diversity provision in your charter, but if somebody doesn't have the ability to get to the meeting, or to have their kids taken care of and participate even in a Zoom meeting without having kids running around the house, so you can take a serious vow of being a member of a board or commission. You can't do it. So Hartford has looked at that for all their boards and commissions. Not compensation, but reimbursement.
Commissioner San Germain, you had a question? I thought I saw your hand, or no? Okay.
No, Mr. Chair, I'm good. Thank you so much.
Okay. Any other questions on item 3? Okay, we'll move over to item 5. And we're discussing this, and I mean, obviously, we're going to have deliberations, so we, as we go through this process, and our next meeting on the 18th, any notes that you may have, just jot them down, and we'll go through and or recommendations, we can get them to our secretary, and go from there. So
if you get them to me, that would be useful, because I could start thinking about what I can do. Yeah.
We got that.
We'll talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Gotcha, Steve. Item 5. Any questions on item 5?
I don't want any more people. 30 number is a good number. I deal with almost 4,500 now. Imagine if I had to go to 10,000. It's a lot of conversations, a lot of emails, so that's why 30 is a good number. Because everybody in my community, as Richard knows me, they're waving to me, beeping the horn, calling me. So if it got larger, like, not everybody knows Rosa Delore. She's so vast, you know what I mean? Or I'm very personal, as my former colleague Michael Smart, right?
Mm-hmm.
They know you in your community. So the number 30, some people think we should be less, but I have a personal touch with everybody. I know their children go to school, who goes to church, who's been sick. There's a plus to that. And Mr. Mennick, I think you felt the same way when you ran. Your community knew you.
Oh, yeah. I won't tell you what my position was on 30, but no, it was the most wonderful political job you could possibly have, because you do get to, I used to walk over a 3-year period. I knocked at every door twice, was my plan. In my re-election years, everybody's in the state election years, half the ward, and then my ward committee do the rest. But it was wonderful. It was a great job. It was a great opportunity.
So what this is talking about is maintaining the same number of alders on boards and commissions.
Yeah.
When all alders are of the same
party.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, this is not a change in composition.
I'm sorry.
That's trying to figure out.
I'm sorry. I thought it was the number.
Yeah.
I know that was there. Sorry.
So if I can just give our commissioners a little bit of background of how the voting works, I think it would kind of help you understand what's going on. So we have, so of course, all the alders are elected by vote of their constituents in each ward. Within the Board of Alders, we vote on what we call leadership positions. The president is voted on by the full Board of Alders. The president pro temp or vice president is also voted on the full Board of Alders at the very first meeting of after the election. The majority leader is voted on by the majority party, which in this case is the Democrats. And that's done in one of our caucus meetings. The third officer, because we don't have a minority party, the third officer is also voted on the floor by the full Board of Alders, because there's not a minority representation for that party to vote for a minority leader in their own caucus. So we have three that are elected on the floor: the president pro temp, and what we call the third officer. So if I'm following this correctly, I think that the question at hand is because Alder DeCola mentioned the 7 commissions or boards that is required to have a minority party representation of an alder sitting on it. And so the question is whether or not those 7 should be occupied by the minority leader
Or voted on by the full body.
or voted on or appointed by the mayor, which is what this language is, right? If I'm following right. Appointed by the mayor with the approval of the Board of Alders?
The members of boards and commissions are appointed by the mayor, subject to approval of boards and commissions. Your aldermanic representatives come out of the body.
Right.
So you're the authority for those members of the commission. What I'm saying here is that since the mayor is the principal appointing authority, the mayor should be responsible for making sure, looking at the Board of Alders, knowing that you have this dilemma where the alders cannot provide a diverse political appointments, that as the mayor makes his or her appointments, that the mayor is mindful of that, make sure that the composition of the body is such that it can accommodate 2 Democrats, as long as that's what you got, 2 Democrats coming from the Board of Alders, because you're not going to be appointing somebody other than a Democrat. You only have the choice. Your universe is limited to 30 people. So that's what the language tries to do, is to really make that a mayor's responsibility, and it gives, the alders should reject somebody if that's going to throw it out of whack. I mean, the issue right now is that we probably have commissions. I'll look at the 7 that are out of whack, where you can't put 2 alders. Hopefully you'll put 1 alder on.
Yeah, we do have one.
Yeah.
Like the Parks Commission.
And that shouldn't throw anything off, but when you put the second one on, you could throw it off. So until that is fixed, you may not be able to exercise the 2. So I try to create a mechanism that forces the mayor to look at his appointments, or her appointments, and the mayor is the one that's going to have to accommodate non-majority party members. That's the way.
So these are appointments outside of alders.
Correct.
Yes,
Yes.
Isn't it in the absence of a minority representative? If there
it
was a
should
minority-
be.
if there was a minority representative, you don't trigger it, right?
If you have the minority party, if you had a member of a minority party on the Board of Alders, one person, they'd probably be on all of these commissions. We had that with Einhorn.
This doesn't happen,
This doesn't happen. You don't have this problem.
right, so it's only
Because-
when, in the failure
Correct.
of Republicans
Yeah.
or independents, then you go to a backup where the mayor gets to appoint.
No. The mayor makes all the appointments already,
Right.
Commissioner. What I'm saying here is that the mayor needs to be mindful when he is making the appointment of the current political composition, because you're gonna have to adjust some of these boards and commissions to get the alders back with full
I get
representation.
what you're getting.
I get it.
When it comes time to make reappointments,
Yeah.
he has to balance the numbers, so we
Yeah.
on the board can put another Democrat
Yeah.
on there.
So it's gonna take, there's gonna be a lead time, and so the mayor can't reappoint some people, because the mayor's gonna have to appoint somebody of a non-majority status.
Right.
The Board of Alders is the majority party, and they don't have any choice.
So there's no trigger, the Board of Aldermen still elects their 7, and the mayor's got to deal with what their 7 happens. That's what you're saying.
Well, the 7 boards, yeah, the
7
representatives, that's 14, right? It's two for each of those boards,
Right.
yeah.
Then it falls on I get it now. It falls on the mayor to make sure he doesn't put a Democrat.
Yeah.
He has to leave that position for the board when we're all one party. so we can put somebody on there.
Mhm.
That's what I
Mine
get.
As the mayor, if you have a body right now that has, you're at the cap of what you can have for majority party, presumably one of the members of that cap is you're one member who can serve. Right now, two people can't serve.
Right.
So by having that alder, you reach the cap. When the mayor makes the next appointment, hopefully that would be a member of the majority party, the mayor's gonna have to appoint somebody of another party to accommodate the alders having a full representation. That's what I'm saying, is that, because the alders have no choice. That's the structure we have. So you're not gonna fix it immediately, but this is designed to establish a constitutional standard that says the mayor's responsibility. I built it off of the minority party representation statute that makes it the appointing authority's responsibility. You're also the appointing authority, but you have no choice because you don't have diversity of party on the New Haven Board of Alders, and I can't think of the last time they did. I don't think we did 10 years ago when we did this charter revision, because that's when we created the position that Alder DeColo holds right now. And
So do we have, I was saying, does the board have the thing that if the mayor appoints somebody and we know he's putting a Democrat, do we have a right to say?
you can reject it.
We can
Yeah,
reject it.
in fact, I have language in here that the failure of the mayor to comply with this requirement shall be the sole basis of disapproval of the appointment by the Board of Alders at their sole discretion.
So that means all
So
a fair.
you have that, whether you have that line in there or not, you have that ability, but you say to the mayor, don't give us another Democrat. We want our representation.
So at the end, it makes a lot of sense. Now I get it. I
Yeah.
understand.
And that's what you need to do. I couldn't snap my fingers and say you've been restored. I've tried to create a path to get you restored.
So if the mayor doesn't do his job, we have the authority to shoot that person.
We have that authority anyhow.
Right,
Yes.
right.
But now you have, now
You're
there's
not
a,
doing it just
yeah.
on,
we're not being mean to the person.
Right.
We're saying the mayor knows the rules and we've asked the mayor
what do we think?
to do it. It's a political decision and the mayor has to work with the president of the council, of the board to make it happen. So that's what the language, I'll look at the language again, I'll ask Attorney Keys to look at it as well. See, I don't mind being second guessed on these things. I just want to make sure it works. The idea is to create a path to get you back with your two representatives.
Mr. Vice Chair?
So let me go back to the representation of alders on the board or on a board or commission. When there is no minority party representation and it requires there to be an alder who is a Republican and Democrat, how does this fit in?
Well, the way it works is it shouldn't throw it off. If you have, the board or commission should still be in a place where you can have, I mean, you could throw it off. Let me look at one of these circumstances where there's a 2-vote margin. Well, we don't have too many 12-member commissions. But if you have a 9-member commission, it's 5-4. It could still throw it off if you have 5 Democrats on a 9-member commission. And, but one of the Democrats is probably already an alder in that cycle. So if you have a member of either party, I don't think we ever had a minority party representation problem when we had the 2 parties on the board of alders, because we had one guy, John Einhorn, or Roby Pooley, who served on most of the boards as the Republican representative back in the day.
So if we have a board that requires 1 Democrat and 1 Republican alder, as with litigation settlement, right? Does that require one from each party?
Yeah.
That's different. That's an ordinance that created that standard. So you might have to change that ordinance.
Okay, so this doesn't address the dilemma that we have where we don't have enough Republicans to fill all of the committee seats that require 2 alders from different parties.
I'm not sure that the litigation settlement committee would necessarily require a minority party representation. It's an internal tribunal that is designed to address some of these issues, but the ordinance has been created that way. So you might have to change the ordinance or expand the ordinance to permit a second member there, because I don't think.
I believe it does say of different parties.
Yeah.
Members of different parties.
So
So
I have to look at it again.
So what this falls in, because my question then is, because I would think that would be the position of the minority leader or the third officer to fill in where a different party from the automatic staff or board is required. Am I making so?
Yeah.
So we have a third officer who's supposed to represent the minority party,
But they're not of the minority party.
but they're not of the
Purposes
minority
of
parties.
Minority party representation statute, it doesn't satisfy that.
Okay, I get it.
And everybody needs to understand, the minority party representation is it's misnamed. It's a cap on majority party representation. That's what it is. Because as some parties have learned harshly over the years, if they don't play along, all of a sudden you don't see Democrats or Republicans as the minority party. You see unaffiliated and Green parties or taxpayer parties that show up. You don't have to have the opposition party that is the standard opposition party, the Ds or the Rs.
So Steve, so language wise, can we kind of change that? You know what I mean? And make that a little more clear?
In what regard?
As far as you're saying it's not, it's not.
Well, with the state statute, I can't change the state statute. We're operating under the state statute.
But even like changing the party name, just kind of the language is around that?
I can take a look at that. I've never
Okay.
done that. I mean, where I could say that what it means, minority, I mean, I could say what minority party representation means is that the mayor and the board of alders can't have a body that has more than, more than X number of one political party in the majority. That's what it means. And so that's what the statute means. So the idea is, I think it triggers the fact that we would have minority party representation. It doesn't guarantee it. It just guarantees a cap on the majority party. And you know, around the state, you know people around the state, maybe it's happened in New Haven. We're so pure in New Haven, so maybe it didn't happen in New Haven, where people left a party to become unaffiliated or join the Republican Party to get on a board or commission. I've seen those things over the years, kind of an end run on the minority party representation statute, but you have to have the affiliation or not be affiliated. And that's where the mayor has a little more flexibility. You have no flexibility is the problem with the automatic appointments, the alder appointments. The mayor does have flexibility to be able to choose any party or unaffiliated to go on a board or commission.
So I want to display my ignorance once again, right? I was under the impression that there were boards and commissions where a Republican was required. And then when the Republican failed, that Sal took over, right?
That's what I thought.
So am I right or wrong on that?
What they did is they created this position so that you had still three people on the leadership.
Right.
You know, for example, one of the functions of the leadership, the minority, majority, and president, was legal service contracts. And I remember being left out of that as president pro tem, but the three of them had that ability. And in order to accommodate that, because you didn't have minority leaders for a number of years, they created the position that Sal now holds. But he's not a member of a minority party.
So this doesn't change that. All it
This doesn't
says,
change that at all.
all it says to the mayor is the next time around, you got to take care of it, right? Put some
As
burden-
you are making appointments, you need to be mindful of the composition to be able to accommodate the two Democrats that the board has no
Okay.
choice but to appoint.
And
That's,
it's only 7 boards. I think.
yeah,
Thank you. I get it.
all right,
I get it. Yep.
you got it?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Took me a minute.
Yeah.
Could be more.
Yeah, ask Al Lucas. Al and I, Al was hung up on me one morning.
So basically,
One more?
into the numbers.
Yeah, it's gotta fall in with those numbers.
So it doesn't matter that there's two Democratic alders, as long as the number meets.
Well, the reality is, if there's a cap on a majority party, and you know two of them are gonna be Democrats coming from the board, the mayor needs to compensate for that with the other appointments.
Okay.
That's what it means.
Okay.
All right? So you know that if you have a cap, the mayor can't exceed it, the mayor, if the cap is 5 and there's 3 Democrats on there now, or there's 4 Democrats on there now, because you only have the one seat you've been able to, the mayor can't reappoint that Democrat. The mayor has to appoint an unaffiliated to give the seat to
And
the,
if he fails to do that,
you can reject it.
we can reject it.
Yeah.
So in the current charter, And under this language, what happens if there are 29 Democrats on the Board of Alders and one person in a minority party? Do they
Yeah,
have to serve on all?
that person would be on all
seven
the boards and commissions. We had a situation like that,
Yeah.
in the eighties and early nineties with
Only
Einhorn,
the Pinos did it.
Yeah.
Pino, Einhorn, Roby Pooley. I think we had a couple of Republicans, although there was one point we had one. And that person was on every board and commission.
present times, I guess?
Yeah.
Yes, you're right.
And that person becomes a minority leader.
And is the minority leader. Well, you know what he
That's a
does.
bad job.
It's a great job. Tell me, what are we gonna do today? Figure it out. All right,
Item 6. Creating the charter to include provisions requiring all memorandums of understanding to be approved by alders. Any questions on this item? Mr. Vice Chair?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know we've been kind of going back and forth, and I think this is a very important provision in light of some things that have happened that the board did not know about, as Rebecca has mentioned. But can we have Corp Counsel come and talk, give your opinion on why you think this may not be good for the board? I remember we had a conversation with labor relation stipulations that, and so it'd be good for us to get that so we can debate it.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for
Name
being
and address
here.
for the record?
Nice to see you too.
nice to be seen.
So anyway,
Name and address for the record.
oh, I'm sorry. Patricia King, Corporation Counsel, 32 Vista Terrace in New Haven. This, as I read this quickly, requires, this proposal number 6 in the papers here requires that the mayor on a quarterly basis submits to the Board of Alders a quarterly report on all contracts, agreements, etc., entered into on behalf of the city. This does not, in the way I read it, require that the Board of Alders approve any contracts entered into on behalf of the city. The way I read this, and maybe I'm missing something because I just looked at this for the first time tonight, this is just, in my view, similar to the disclosure ordinance that's already passed, where the city is required to disclose to the Board of Alders all memoranda, agreements, MOUs, and things of that nature to the Board of Alders, which is, to my understanding, has been complied with by, in my understanding, all the MOUs and agreements that are entered into by the city are then provided to Mr. Lucas, generally within 36 hours, which was what the ordinance requires. That time period's a little tight in my view, but I think generally it's been complied with. The way I understood the proposal initially that was made in connection with the charter review was that the Board of Alders wanted to have the authority to approve every MOU or agreement entered into on behalf of the city. This proposal that is before you in this packet just requires the same disclosure, but it requires that the mayor put together a collective list of everything per quarter and disclose it to the Board of Alders, which in my view is a little bit redundant if the city departments are already making disclosures anyway. The way I read this proposal is that the mayor would have to make a separate disclosure on a quarterly basis of everything that's been entered into. Which doesn't have, the way I read this, the Board of Alders doesn't have a role in approving any of these MOUs or agreements that have been entered into there. It's just a disclosure provision, and we already have an ordinance for that. This just requires the mayor to submit a quarterly list. So it's, in my view, a little bit redundant as I read this. The proposal that I wrote the memo about was, as I understood, a proposal that the Board of Alders has to basically be a third party to the contract and approve every agreement or MOU that's entered into by the city. And that, I think, as I explained, is problematic, partly because of any labor agreements. I think you might have a problem with a MIRA, the Municipal Employees Relations Act violation. And in negotiating contracts, the city department would have, would have a problem with it, whatever vendor we're entering into agreements with, because they only want to negotiate with the decision maker. They don't want to negotiate with the city, and then the city says, oh, wait a minute, we have to send this to the Board of Alders for approval. And then there may be a whole nother round of negotiations, and that's going to be incredibly inefficient and time consuming, but that's not what I'm reading here that's before you now.
Attorney Mitnick.
Yeah, and the Corporation Counsel is correct, and I correct that if you'd like, although she probably wouldn't like it. My general approach on these things is that if a contract is within 1 year and there's money in the budget for the contract, that contract should be signed by a mayor and not go back to the legislative body at all. The issues that I try to capture in some of the reform ordinances, and we can look at it here, are the multi-year obligations. And the one thing I would disagree with my good friend, the Corporation Counsel, is that if there's a multi-year MOU, I think that multi-year MOU has to come back before the board, or if there's a pension issue to a pension board, or somewhere like that, where the mayor doesn't have the ability, I don't believe, to circumvent the legislative authority. So I drafted it as a disclosure, and it models the ordinance. The Court Counsel is absolutely correct about that. The intent was to constitutionalize that standard for the disclosure. She's right. So you want to have a situation where you can't get rid of that ordinance. If you have an administration somewhere down the line and he wants to get rid of it or soften the standard, you would have no ability to do that. So my recommendation is that if you truly want to approve these, and I say this as a former legislator, it just seems to me that what you should be looking at are multi-year approvals as opposed to approvals within the budget. When you're approving a budget, you're saying to a mayor, do your job. And so my focus on approvals would be on a multi-year basis. And so, so she's right, it's a disclosure. I might have misread the proposal.
And generally, I don't recall off the top of my head that we do MOUs on a multi-year basis. They're generally, when you're looking at something on a multi-year, an agreement that's going to be executed over a multi-year period, those are generally in the form of contracts, because in my view, on practice, I think a contract is a much more formal agreement. When you have something that's going to go on over a period of years, you're looking at a contract as opposed to an MOU. But my thinking would be that if there were an MOU that covered a multi-year period, those would go to the Board of Alders just the same as a multi-year contract would. And I think we've been, generally every department honors that. I mean, I think, we've seen that since I've been here anyway. So I think you could put, I did not see multi-year in here. I think multi-year MOU should be treated. I don't see any reason why it shouldn't be treated in the same way as a multi-year contract. As I said, MOUs are, I think, useful for kind of informal, less significant situations, but I think when you have something multi-year, you're probably looking at a formal contract anyway.
Mr. Vice Chair.
Anything that comes before anything that's multi-year has to come before the board. Anything that's over $100,000
yes.
comes before the Board of Alders for approval. I think we were, and that's why I asked you to come. I think we were thinking that MOUs somehow needed some sort of approval over a certain dollar amount coming before the board. I do agree with our counselor that it is important to have this in the charter because an ordinance is easy to amend. This is not easy to amend because it has to go to referendum and the voters have to vote on it. Would it be your opinion, sir, that it is not prudent for the board to vote on MOUs over a certain dollar amount?
So I have a slightly different perspective. I don't see MOUs as distinguishable from contracts. They're contracts. And you're right. I think that when you look at a contract, you usually call it contract or agreement. You probably don't call it. But I've seen plenty of MOUs over the years that are multi-year in impact or financial impact on a community. I don't distinguish between the two. So whatever standard exists for contracts should exist for MOUs, MOAs, letters of agreement, anything that has any kind of intent to commit the municipality. As I said, if it's for the year, I don't have a huge problem from the perspective of legislative oversight for the mayor to have that sole responsibility. That's what the mayor's job is to administer the government. And you pass the budget, the mayor has to spend the money accordingly. I'm doing this in another community right now, in the community aimed at boards of education. One of the big problems with boards of education is they do a lot of things to circumvent local budget procedures. And there's constitutional law, there's very clear case law that gives the local government the ability on matters of local concern with authority over boards of education. So I have a disclosure requirement in several of my charters, but the one we're negotiating right now that requires these reports from the Board of Ed, in this case the mayor, in that case the Board of Ed, because we want to see if there's anything going on that shouldn't be going on. And one of the things that we have done is we've expanded the standards so that if you are bidding a project for multiple years and you're masking it as a one-year contract with an option agreement in it or an extension agreement in it, that's a multi-year contract. And so we're trying to capture those. The disclosure provision is designed to trigger when this comes over to the city council, hey, you haven't brought this to us. It's not a valid contract. So that's the rationale behind disclosure. But I don't see a huge difference. I think you can change your standard to make sure that MOUs are covered in the same way that contracts are.
And I just wanted to add, from the city's contracting process, I think MOUs are less formal, where the city's specific contracting process requires certificates of insurance, and there are other more formal formalities, I should say, attached to a contract as opposed to an MOU. But I do agree they're essentially the same thing. They're agreements between two parties. And if MOUs wanted to be over, related to a dollar amount for approval, I would think it would make sense to have it be the same as what you do for contract, what the board would do for contracts.
Except that there was an MOU that didn't come before us that resulted in hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I think that's the premise of which.
After my time and before hers.
Yes.
I love
and we are very happy.
I was quite.
Well, I think we may want to, but.
And without getting into the
something we want to
details of
discuss
that.
here.
We don't discuss it tonight, but that's.
But that was also, to the extent that there is an extra approval process attached to a labor agreement that may be subject to MIRA, that extra approval process is not included in the bargaining unit contract. And adding that step is what could trigger a MIRA violation by the union.
And as you see, and I'm going to yield in just a moment. And so as you see, this particular amendment or proposed article will not have any effect on any of the MIRA regulations as written.
And labor has disclosed MOUs that have been entered into to resolve labor matters. I mean, the disclosure requirement, in my view, in my understanding, and I don't run labor relations, but My understanding is that those MOUs that resolve labor matters are disclosed to the board anyway.
That is correct. But the rationale in the drafting of that ordinance was to get the disclosure to see if there is any action that was taken that should have come before. I respectfully disagree on the issue. I don't think MIRA has created any way, shape, or form. Unless the contract itself, if there's a contract that says you don't go to the Board of Alders to approve MOUs or settlements, that's different because there's a statute where the collective bargaining agreement can trump your local charter and your local ordinances. But the charter, if the contract is silent, there's nothing inherent in MIRA that says you don't have to, that you don't have to comply with local procedures. So that if there is a multi-year agreement, whether it's a multi-year agreement on how you're going to treat somebody, what the cost of that's going to be, or there's real monetary settlements, my argument would be that you have to go to the legislative body, the budget authority, for approval for a multi-year agreement, whether it's in labor or not. This is not the place to argue that case, but there is a difference of opinion there. I don't think MIRA automatically excludes those multi-year contracts from being approved by appropriate authority.
And I think that's what we were looking for, at least in our
We should
original
talk
thinking.
about this then, because I drafted disclosure.
Well, Steve, let's
Yeah, okay.
put that on.
Gotcha.
I yield back to you, Mr. Chair.
So
Thank
there has to be, information missing here in regards to the approval, as you have mentioned prior. This only states kind of the quarterly reports, right?
That is
And
correct.
So, okay.
She's right, yes, absolutely. Now I understand a little better what you're aiming at.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do too. I think it
Yeah.
was,
Yeah,
there was a little bit of,
Yeah.
the discussion was helpful, I think, in understanding.
Okay, so we're gonna rework item 6.
we will do that.
Postpone. Okay, all right, so,
And thank you to the Corporation Council. I always learn a lot of new things when I was next to Pat King.
That's, we enjoy, agreeing to disagree. Thank you.
and, item 9, extending the time period for approval of nominees and boards and commissions from 60 to 90 days.
And then that's back on the page with item 5. I gotta combine the two of them in the same section.
I think if we can explain the process, it might be
Here?
helpful to understand why we want to extend the time. And so in the summer months, the Board of Alders only meets once a month. So if the mayor sends his appointment, then it has to be communicated, which then the clock will begin when it's communicated at our meeting. In the winter will be the first meeting, the first Monday of the month. Then it has to go to an Aldermanic Affairs Committee, be assigned to that committee, and then notice has to go out to the person that is appointed for a date to appear. And then it has to go to a first and second reading. And now we're already in the winter, possibly coming up on 90 days. So what happens in the winter months, whenever there's an appointment, is
Summer months you're talking about.
summer months. So what happens in the summer months is appointments that come before the Aldermanic Affairs Committee has to be discharged for an immediate vote. Because if we don't vote on a mayor's appointment within 60 days, it becomes automatic. And so we want to extend the amount of time so that when we hit the summer months, it gives us enough time to be in session without having to discharge it for an immediate vote. And it can follow the rules of the Board of Alders and the charter to have a first and second reading for any appointment that comes before the board. This does not include the people in the mayor's cabinet. It's just for those who are on boards and commissions. anyone that the mayor hires directly that has to come before the board will still have that.
Department heads.
Department heads. We'll still have that 30 days? Is it 30? I think it's 30 days. 30 days to vote on, so we gotta move quick on that, or he gets it straight. I hope I explained that right. I haven't had dinner yet.
And then just bear in mind, any questions that you may have, you can get them over to secretary, and certainly Steve, we'll be talking.
Sure.
Commissioner, no? Yeah, oh, okay.
Did I explain that well?
Oh, excellent.
Yep, no, that was good.
90 days would be very beneficial to the board, so we vet it, and the public can have more time to input, because the public is getting cut out of this 60 days. So they don't have much time to read about it or start communicating. We've had some issues with the education board. We had some, but like I said, 90 days would give, to me, it gives the public more time to engage in appointments on boards and commissions.
And I think that's very important because after the committee meeting, maybe someone from the public couldn't attend the committee meeting, but they will contact their alder within that 2-week period or 3-week period, depending on when it lands, and say, hey, look, we'd like you to vote this way, or this is what's come up. It gives us time also as colleagues to have a discussion among ourselves over that process of time. When it is discharged and we're voting at our very next meeting, it really reduces the process of being able to give a lot of thought to who we're putting on our board and commission. And even though the boards and commissions are people that work as volunteers, I think that those appointments are very important, and that we shouldn't just appoint people because they said, I'll do it.
And just so you know, Automatic Affairs meets on the last Monday of the month. So if they're in the 60-day window, that means the following Monday, we are voting on it. So there's only 7 days for the public to participate.
Any other questions? No?
Do you want to discuss the plurality vote issue and some of the public issues as well?
Yes.
I gave you my 2 cents already. But the first issue is the plurality voting and the language in the charter on plurality voting. I think somebody actually did ask that we modify that, and I gave you some alternatives. I also indicated my position was that if the state is going to move in this direction, they probably would trump our local charter anyhow and require the new voting system.
If the state trumps, then do we have to put it in our charter or just?
No, the charter would be out of whack with the state, but, you know, and that's why in some of my charters, we just say that we conduct our elections in accordance with the general statutes. And the general statutes is plurality standard. That's the other alternative, is to just clean it up that way, so that you don't have to do anything if the state decides to go in another direction. We don't have the privilege of remaining a plurality community if you go to ranked choice voting statewide. That's highly unlikely. What is possible is the state might experiment. The state might set up some pilots. I think that's what's most likely to happen with ranked choice voting at this juncture, but I don't know that for a fact. But I think if it became effective statewide, it would do it. And if they did it on a pilot basis, then the special legislation could be crafted saying, notwithstanding the provisions of your charter, New Haven has been designated to be a community that would be utilizing ranked choice voting. So there's a number of ways to fix it. You can fix the language, you can let it stay. If you want to be part of it, you can get your legislators to make sure that you basically have notwithstanding language so that you can do it. So it's really a call for you.
Commissioner Schwartz is going to check her notes too to see if she had anything on the and also, we'll go from there. Next meeting on the 18th.
And then the traffic authority issue? Does anybody, anything on that you want to discuss? And the last issue is the health board membership. So if people have thoughts on these things, contact your secretary, Commissioner Schwartz, and she'll let me know, and so I can help provide some further guidance on the agenda at our meeting next week. I will also talk to leadership about the language that the Corporation Council addressed, to make sure we have an updated language on that, so that you can take a look at that as well.
Any further discussion?
No.
Okay, so our next meeting is the 18th.
Can I ask a question, Mr. Chair? No, that's not.
No.
That was, they were holding that date.
All right.
And not using it. We have a tentative meeting on the 22nd. You know, you're gonna hold that just in case?
We're gonna hold that.
Just want to make sure.
Yep.
No, I'm planning around it, that's all.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you.
See you in person.
It's nice to be here in person. Nice to be anywhere in person. Right, Sue?
Absolutely.
Mr. Lucas has some refreshments in the back for us, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. The motion to adjourn?
Can I have one more comment? Sorry. Our agenda and the paperwork, if we can receive it 24 hours, more than 24 hours in advance, please, I appreciate it. I'm not rushed to read it.
Sure.
Let it be written, let it be done.
Wow.
Wow, that was pretty good. Biblical.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor? Aye.
Where you said it was the greatest thing.
Yeah, so,
I want to know for tomorrow. I was thinking, you know,
so you'll connect with.
big